My parents dismissed my medical bills while bankrolling my sister's crashed projects. Now they expect me to hand over $25,000 for her wedding. I cut them off forever. My name is Ethan, I'm 35, and for most of my life, I felt like the unseen son. My younger sister, Sophie, she was the golden child, treated like royalty while I was an afterthought. But the real breaking point, the moment everything shattered, was when I nearly died, and my parents told me, flat out, "You're on your own." Fast forward 4 years, and they had the audacity to ask me to fund Sophie's lavish wedding. You need to understand how we got here because this isn't just about one event or one request for cash. It's 3 decades of blatant favoritism that culminated in them leaving me to battle for my life from a hospital bed. On the surface, we looked like the quintessential suburban family. Dad in pharmaceutical sales, mom a dental hygienist, comfortable, upper middle class, good schools, vacations. But inside our 4-bedroom house, the dynamic was twisted. It started when Sophie was born when I was 4. She was mom's dream girl, dad's little princess. I became the practice run, the early draft with all the parenting mistakes. The bias wasn't subtle. When I played Little League, my parents would show up to maybe half my games, always with an excuse about work or other responsibilities. I'd search the bleachers during warm-ups, my heart sinking when they weren't there. Other parents noticed. My coach noticed. I pretended it didn't hurt, but it always did. Sophie started dance at 5, and they never missed a single recital. Not one. Front row seats, flowers, professional photographers, treating every performance like Broadway. Afterwards, lavish dinners to celebrate. I'd be home with a sitter, or later, alone, eating leftovers. Christmas mornings? They were a joke, and frankly, a source of fear for me. I'd get practical things, school clothes, a new bag, maybe a book. Sometimes, just socks and underwear. Sophie. She had a mountain of presents, dolls, games, gadgets, a new bike, a full bedroom makeover one year. The inequality was sickeningly obvious. Even extended family would comment, but my parents would just laugh it off. Girls need more things, they'd say, or Ethan's just not materialistic. They actually convinced themselves I preferred it this way, that I was naturally minimalist. In reality, I just learned that showing disappointment only made things worse. High school, I finally found something I loved. Debate club. I was genuinely excited. My parents, they said the $30 registration fee was too steep, told me to focus on grades. Couldn't afford $30. That same year, I found a receipt for a custom-made outfit for Sophie's 8th grade graduation. $1,000. For a dress she'd wear once. My passion for $30? Nope. Her 8th grade dress? $1,000, no questions asked. The message was crystal clear. Sophie was an investment. I was an expense to be cut. So, I adapted. I became self-sufficient. At 14, I got my first job washing dishes, saving every cent in a shoebox. By 15, a real savings account. 16, I bought my own car insurance, then my own used Honda Civic off Craigslist for $3,500 cash. My parents praised my independence. Then 2 years later, when Sophie got her license, they bought her a brand new Volkswagen Jetta. She totaled it 6 months later texting while driving. They bought her another one. I worked my way through community college, then a state university for engineering, racking up $45,000 in student loans because my parents couldn't afford tuition. Years later, I found out they'd opened a college fund for me when I was born, with contributions from my grandparents. It should have been $35,000 by 18. They drained it entirely to pay for Sophie's private high school because she decided public school wasn't challenging enough. Really, it was because her friends were going. $20,000 a year for 3 years. $60,000 of my money gone, so Sophie could keep up with her social life. When I finally found out, Mom said, "Well, you were doing fine in public school, Ethan. Sophie needed that intellectual challenge. Sophie, who graduated with a 2.8 GPA and no college acceptances beyond community college. By the time I graduated with my civil engineering degree, I'd learned not to expect anything. I was genuinely surprised when they showed up for my ceremony, but they had to leave right after my name was called. They had to take Sophie to a 3-hour dance competition. I couldn't even stay for the reception. No cap and gown photo. I landed a great job, starting at $55,000. It was hard work, long hours on building sites, learning everything from scratch. But I was good at it. Really good. I worked my tail off, volunteering for the toughest assignments. 2 promotions in 4 years. By 30, I was a project manager making $85,000, handling multi-million-dollar projects. I saved up, bought my own condo, furnished it with Craigslist finds and IKEA. I earned every single thing I had. Nothing was handed to me. Meanwhile, Sophie bounced from one artistic hobby to another. Photographer for 6 months, $4,000 on equipment charged to my parents' credit card, 20 paid sessions, then not her passion. Social media manager for a few months, mostly Instagram. Then artisan candles, her true calling. My parents set up a full studio in their basement, professional equipment, a website. She made about 12 candles before getting bored. Next, yoga instructor. My parents paid $2,000 for her certification course in California, including travel and lodging. Every single venture failed within weeks or months, but my parents funded every pivot, every hobby, every failed business. They called it supporting her journey of self-discovery. I called it enabling a perpetual teenager. She lived rent-free in their finished basement apartment, 1,000 square feet with a full kitchen, bathroom, and private entrance, an apartment that would rent for $1,500 a month. They paid off her credit cards every month, no questions asked. She was 30 and had never paid a utility bill, never worried about health insurance, never felt that terror when your check engine light comes on and you have to choose between fixing your car and eating for 2 weeks. The resentment built slowly, layer by layer. It impacts you, watching your parents go above and beyond for one child while you're an afterthought. It shapes how you see yourself, your worth. But I kept my mouth shut, maintained a polite distance, showed up for holidays. I'd sit at their dining table, making small talk, watching them gush over Sophie's latest failed business plan, while my own achievements went almost entirely unacknowledged. That was my plan. Don't rock the boat. I had my own life, my own success. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd learned to live without it. Then, 4 years ago, everything changed. It revealed who they truly were. I started having stomach pains. Just a persistent ache at first. I ignored it, thinking it was stress or bad food. But it got worse. Sharp pains that knocked me over, nausea, fever, sweating through my sheets. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Finally, the agony was so bad I couldn't stand up straight. I drove myself to urgent care alone because I didn't want to bother anyone on a Saturday. That was a mistake. The nurse took one look at my pale face and rushed me in. Vitals, questions, quick tests. The doctor came in, looking worried, pressing on my abdomen while I bit back screams. Then he said, "You need to get to the emergency room right now. This could be your appendix. And if it is, it might have already ruptured." I drove myself to the ER. In agonizing pain, slumped over the steering wheel, taking side streets because I didn't trust myself on the freeway. I spent 6 hours in the packed waiting room, sweating and shivering, the pain escalating from bad to unbearable. By the time they finally got me into a room for a CT scan, the surgeon had that grim look doctors get when they're about to tell you something awful. My appendix had ruptured. Peritonitis. An infection spreading through my abdominal cavity. If not treated immediately, it's fatal. Within an hour, they rushed me to emergency surgery. I barely had time to sign the consent forms. One minute I'm in the ER, the next I'm on a gurney, lights flashing overhead, then a mask on my face, counting backward from 10. I woke up hours later feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. And then maybe run over again, just for good measure. Tubes everywhere. A drain tube in my side that looked medieval and ached more than anything I'd ever felt. Every breath was a knife in my gut. The surgeon told me how bad it had been. They had to do extensive cleaning. The appendix had been burst for at least 48 hours. Another day or two, and I might not have made it. I'd be in the hospital for 5 to 7 days on 4 antibiotics, then weeks of recovery at home. No lifting, no driving, high risk of infection. That's when the second truck hit me. Money. I had health insurance through work, good coverage, but I'd chosen a high-deductible plan to save on premiums. I was young, healthy, never went to the doctor. The kind of decision you make when you think you'll never need major medical treatment. The deductible. $25,000. $25,000. The number was so big it didn't feel real. I made the financial advisor repeat it 3 times. But it was the truth. I was personally liable for $25,000 before insurance would cover a single dime. They could set up a payment plan, but the money was due. Period. I was 30. I'd been saving furiously for 3 years, building an emergency fund like all the financial gurus recommend. I had about $18,000 saved, and I was so proud of it. Money I'd sacrificed for, skipping social events, brown bagging lunch, driving my old Honda, turning down trips. This would wipe it all out, leave me with an additional $7,000 in debt, and I'd be out of work for at least a month, with short-term disability only covering 60% of my wages. On day 2, still hooked up to IVs, feeling like absolute crap, I called my parents. My hands were shaking as I dialed. I explained everything through a fog of pain meds. The surgery, the complications, the long hospital stay, the unexpectedly high medical bills. I wasn't even asking for the full amount, just whatever they could help with. Even $5,000 or $6,000 would make a huge difference. I'd pay them back with interest, I said, just needed a little help to avoid total financial collapse. There was a long silence. Then my dad said, "That's rough. Have you looked into the hospital's financial assistance programs?" I had. I made too much money. My $85,000 annual income put me way over the threshold. I told him this, asked again if they could do anything, even a loan, with a signed agreement. Another long pause. Then Mom got on the phone, using that voice she used when she'd rehearsed something. "Ethan," she said, "we'd love to help, but we just don't have that kind of money lying around right now. Maybe you should have gotten better insurance when you had the chance. This is part of being an adult, dealing with unexpected expenses and planning ahead." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was in a hospital bed, recovering from life-saving emergency surgery, and they were lecturing me about insurance options and financial planning like I was a child who mismanaged his allowance. "You helped Sophie with her car down payment," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. $13,000 last year. "That was different," Dad interjected. "She needed reliable transportation to get to work." "And I countered, need to not be in crushing medical debt from life-saving surgery." "Well, maybe if you'd been more careful about your health." That's when I knew. They were blaming me for being sick. As if I'd chosen to have my appendix rupture. Dad snatched the phone back. His voice was forceful now. "Look, we're sorry you're going through this, but we can't just drop everything to bail you out. You have a good job. You're smart. You'll figure it out. That's what we raised you to do. Be independent and handle your own problems." Handle your own problems. Those words struck me like physical blows. This wasn't a problem I caused. This was a medical crisis that happened to me, through no fault of my own. And they were treating it like I'd made a terrible financial decision and now needed to learn my lesson. Can you at least come visit? I begged, hating how desperate I sounded. We'll try to get by this week, Mom responded. But your dad has a big presentation Wednesday, and I have that charity event Thursday. They visited once during my week-long hospital stay. Showed up Saturday afternoon, stayed about 40 minutes. Most of that time was spent discussing Sophie's angst over her newest failed business venture, the candle thing. They were concerned about her emotional health. I was lying there, tubes sticking out of me, facing financial ruin, and they were telling me how difficult things were for Sophie because her hobby business wasn't working out. They didn't bring food, didn't offer to help with anything. Just checked the box and left. As I watched them walk out, a moment of profound clarity hit me. I was completely alone in this. Sophie. She never came. I got one text from her on day 3. Sorry you're sick. Hope you feel better soon. With a flower emoji. That was the extent of her concern. I spent that week watching nurses, dealing with pain and discomfort, the humiliation of needing help with basic functions, facing financial disaster that would wipe out years of careful saving. All while knowing my parents could have helped, but chose not to. They had the money. They just spent $13,000 on Sophie's car. They were planning their annual Florida vacation. Dad just bought new golf clubs. But helping their son during a medical emergency? Too much to ask. When I was discharged, I took an Uber home. $48 for my rapidly dwindling funds, just to get back to my condo. I could barely walk. The driver had to help me up the steps. I spent the next month recovering alone, attending follow-up appointments by myself, dealing with insurance paperwork and hospital billing departments while still healing from major surgery. I had to manage my own surgical drains for 2 weeks, changing dressings, checking for infection, measuring drainage. My coworker, Randy, found out what happened and set up a meal train. People from the office, people I barely knew, brought me food for weeks. They brought groceries, picked up my meds, even just sat with me for an hour to give me some human contact. My college friend Tim drove 2 hours every few days to check on me, help me wash without getting my bandages wet, make sure I was taking my prescriptions. He never complained. My parents called twice that month. Both times to tell me about Sophie. First, about her closing the candle business. Did I want to buy any leftover stock? Second, about her new plan to become a yoga instructor. Weren't they just so enthusiastic about her new direction? Neither call asked how I was doing. My medical situation had simply been erased, too inconvenient to think about. I paid off those medical bills over the next 3 years. $25,000. $611 every month for 36 months. Every single payment was a painful reminder of the day my parents chose not to help me. My old Honda started having major problems, forcing me to delay getting a new car. I couldn't save for a down payment on a house. My entire life was on hold, paying off debt from an emergency that wasn't my fault, that my parents could have helped with. Throughout those 3 years, I watched them bail Sophie out again and again. Every time I heard about another bailout, another investment in a failing venture, it felt like a dagger twisting in an old, unhealed wound. Years of deep resentment. Every automatic payment from my bank account felt like a fresh betrayal. Every social media post from my parents about helping Sophie with something new fueled my anger, but I stayed quiet, kept my distance, and just kept telling myself, *, it will eventually be paid off. Then you can move on. *, finally, 3 years and 2 months after the operation, I made the final payment. My loan balance hit 0. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt a simmering rage. Angry for the lost time, the missed opportunities, the stress, all of it completely unnecessary if my parents had just acted like, well, parents. The breaking point happened 3 months ago. I was finally starting to rebuild my finances, feeling financially stable again. My mom called me on a Tuesday. "Sunday dinner?" she asked, her voice brimming with a joyful tone that meant something big was happening. She said they had wonderful news to share. I figured Sophie had finally landed a real job, Maybe something that would actually stick. I agreed to come, marking it on my calendar without much thought, just hoping dinner wouldn't be too awkward. I arrived on Sunday to what I can only describe as a full-blown celebration. Two-tiered cake from the fancy bakery, silver and gold, congratulations, balloons everywhere, a banner stretching across the dining room. Sophie was there, beaming, holding hands with her boyfriend, Ryan. They were engaged. I faked excitement I didn't feel, offered hollow congratulations, asked the usual questions. Ryan seemed like a good guy, worked in IT, stable. If Sophie was happy, great. Whatever. It wasn't my business. Then Dad stood up, tapping his glass with a fork like we were at a formal event. We are so excited to help Sophie and Ryan start their life together, he boomed, his voice full of passion. We've been planning this for months, saving and preparing. We know how expensive weddings can be for young couples. A cold dread started to settle in my stomach. I knew exactly where this was headed. So, he continued, we're going to give them $50,000 toward their wedding and first year of marriage. Consider it our gift to launch their future together. $50,000. The room swam. I gripped the edge of the dining table to steady myself. The same parents who couldn't spare $25,000 when I nearly died were nonchalantly announcing they were spending $50,000 on a wedding. More than double what they refused to help me with during a life-threatening emergency. We're thinking a destination wedding. Sophie gushed, leaning forward. Maybe Italy or Greece, or the Amalfi Coast. Something really special and memorable. Mom was practically glowing. We've been saving specifically for Sophie's wedding for years. We started a fund when she turned 18. We want her special day to be absolutely perfect. Saving for years. That phrase hit me like a physical blow. They'd been steadily saving money for Sophie's hypothetical future wedding while I was drowning in medical debt from a very real, life-threatening situation. That's very generous, I managed, my tone carefully neutral. We're also hoping you'll contribute, Dad said, turning to face me directly. As her older brother, it would mean a lot to Sophie if you helped make her dream wedding come true. We were thinking maybe you could chip in $20,000 or $25,000. You're doing really well with your career now. The room went utterly silent. Everyone was staring at me, expectant. Let me get this straight, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper. You want me to give Sophie $20,000 to $25,000 for her wedding? It's what family does, Dad explained. We all pitch in to help each other during important life moments. Something inside me just broke. Important life moments, I repeated, my voice rising a little. Like emergency surgery to save your life? The temperature in the room dropped about 40 degrees. That was different, Dad said. How was that different? I shot back, my voice gaining strength. You said I had insurance. You said I had options. This is about a family celebration. I had insurance with a $25,000 deductible, which wiped out my entire life savings and put me in debt for 3 years. And you told me to sort it out myself because I'm an adult who should manage his own problems. Ethan, this isn't the time or place, Mom interjected, her voice sharp. When is the time? When is it ever the right time to talk about how you've treated me versus how you treat Sophie? You couldn't spare $25,000 when I was literally dying in a hospital bed, but you've got $50,000 ready to go for a party? A wedding isn't just a party, Sophie piped up defensively. I turned to face her directly. You're right. It's not. But neither was life-saving surgery, and nobody organized a savings fund for that. Nobody baked a cake. Nobody asked how they could help me survive. You never asked for help, she cried. I literally called you from my hospital bed and asked for help. You told me to look into financial aid programs before hanging up. Ryan, Sophie's fiancé, looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. He's a smart guy. Dad's face was turning crimson. We are not going to relitigate past decisions. The question is, are you going to support your sister during this important time in her life, or are you going to be selfish? My answer is no. Sophie's face crumpled. You're seriously going to ruin my wedding because you're still bitter about some medical bills from years ago? I'm not ruining anything, I said, my voice calm now, chillingly calm. You've got $50,000 from Mom and Dad. Have whatever wedding you want with that. But I am not contributing a dime. This is so typical of you. Sophie sobbed. Always making everything about yourself. This is supposed to be my moment, and you're turning it into some drama about ancient history. Ancient history? I paid my last bill 8 months ago. Mom tried a guilt trip. We raised you better than this. Family helps family. You're right, I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. Family does help family. But apparently, that only applies when it's Sophie who needs help. Where are you going? Dad demanded. Home. Congratulations on the engagement, Sophie. I hope you have a great wedding, but pay for it yourselves. I walked out before anyone could reply. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursing through my body. I got home and immediately texted Tim. You won't believe what just happened. His response was immediate. Come over. Bring details. The nuclear fallout started the next morning. Mom called at 6:30 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. By lunchtime, I had 17 missed calls and texts, ranging from, we need to talk, to, you're being incredibly selfish and how can you do this to your sister? Dad's messages were shorter, harsher. Sophie sent a long, emotional text about how I was abandoning her at the most critical moment of her life. I didn't reply to any of them. A few days later, my Aunt Jessica called. Mom's oldest sister, usually quite sensible. Your mother called me very upset, she said. I bet she did, I replied. And then I told her everything. The $25,000 medical debt, the years of partiality, the $50,000 for Sophie's wedding, the demand for another $25,000 from me. There was a long silence. I had no idea about the surgery, Jessica finally said, her voice strained. Your mother never mentioned it. They didn't tell anyone. Ethan, this is beyond favoritism. This is cruel. Hearing someone in my family finally, truly see what I'd been through? It was incredibly validating. I'm not giving them money for a wedding, I told her. You're not the bad guy, she said. Don't let them guilt you. The pressure campaign lasted for weeks. Every manipulative tactic they could think of. Then they escalated. 3 weeks later, Sophie's friend messaged me. Sophie had been complaining about her selfish brother in a wedding planning group. I screenshotted the entire thread and sent it to Sophie. Really? You're putting our family business on social media? She responded, maybe if you're getting called out by everyone, you'll realize how wrong you are. That's when I decided to take control. I called my parents and told them we needed to meet, one last time. A neutral place, a coffee shop near their house. I showed up Saturday morning with a folder full of paperwork. I'm going to say this once, I began, sitting across from them. I am not giving Sophie money for her wedding. Not $25,000, not $500, nothing. No, Ethan, Mom started. I held up my hand. You raised me to be independent and handle my own problems. Those are your exact words. So that's what I'm doing. This is different, Dad insisted. No, it's not. You taught me that family doesn't bail each other out. I learned that lesson very well. I pulled out my hospital bills. $25,000 in medical debt. I paid it off over 3 years, while you funded Sophie's failed ventures. Then the next paper. Here's a list of everything you've given Sophie since she turned 18. It totals about $95,000. For me. Zero. Their faces went pale. Here's what's happening, I continued. I'm not contributing to the wedding. I'm not coming to the wedding. And moving forward, I'm treating you exactly how you treated me, with polite distance and zero support. You're cutting us off? Mom whispered. No, I said, looking them both in the eye. You cut me off 4 years ago. I'm just accepting that reality. This is ridiculous, Dad exclaimed. You're throwing away your family over money. No, I corrected him. You chose money over me when I needed you most. I'm just respecting that choice. I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. That's documentation of what you've spent on Sophie versus me. Keep it. Show people when they ask why I'm not at the wedding. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. The nuclear fallout was immediate. My parents told everyone I had disowned the family. Many extended family members initially sided with them, but then something strange happened. Jessica, my aunt, talked to some of the key family members, including my Uncle John. He called me. I'm disgusted. I had no idea they'd left you hanging. Several relatives had believed my parents had helped with my medical expenses. When they learned the truth, the narrative shifted dramatically. My cousin Emily, a nurse, was horrified. They didn't help after emergency surgery? That's not just unsupportive, that's horrifying. The cohesive front my parents had built completely crumbled. Meanwhile, my life has gotten so much better. I've blocked their numbers, set my social media to private. I should have set these boundaries years ago. Work is great, another promotion and a raise. I started dating someone wonderful. I even took a trip with Tim, my old college friend, the most restful week in years. About 6 weeks ago, I got an email from Dad. We need to talk. I didn't open it. Sent it straight to spam. The wedding happened last month. Jessica told me it was fine, but much smaller than Sophie had originally wanted. Budget concerns, apparently. That $50,000 didn't stretch as far as they'd hoped. So, after hearing all that, what do you think? Did I go too far, or did I do exactly what anyone in my position would have done? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below.